Hey everyone, Blake here. Today we're exploring the cutting edge of AI in auditing with a guest who represents the future of our profession. Josh Poresky is a recent college graduate working in audit at a large accounting firm. He's also a listener of our podcast who reached out to share an AI project he's been working on in his spare time. Using a technique called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short, Josh has created a program that can instantly query hundreds of pages of PCAOB audit guidelines. But that's just the beginning. Josh believes that with AI, we could automate up to 99% of staff work for internal controls testing in SOX audits. Stay tuned for my conversation with Josh. And hey, if you're working on an exciting AI project like Josh, I want to hear about it. Send an email to theaccountingpodcast@earmark.me. That's theaccountingpodcast@earmark.me. Now let's dive in. Hello, Josh Poresky.
Hi, Blake.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So I just graduated from college last year. As of today, completed my first year at RSM. I work in the SOX Audit team. It's called Technology Risk Consulting.
You mentioned this RAG acronym. What does that stand for?
Let's say use ChatGPT as an example of a popular AI program. Right now, it's trained on a very large majority of the internet. OpenAI has taken information from a bunch of different websites and used it to train this bot. And by training it, essentially does what word has the highest chance to follow another. So if it reads a bunch of documents on sports from 2000 to 2020, it'll see that the Patriots were the greatest sports team in the history of the world. And that's how it functions. But what the RAG program does is that instead of using ChatGPT trained on the entire internet, you just give it its knowledge base. So it stands for retrieval augmented generation.
So I say to ChatGPT, I don't want you to focus on your whole knowledge base. I want you to focus on these specific documents that I'm providing you.
Exactly.
So you're doing SOX audits. What's an example of this?
One thing that I've built that I think is pretty cool is I've taken the PCAOB audit guidelines and put that into a RAG program. Let's say we feed this bot a scenario. Okay, there's a password control and they don't have these two things enabled. Would that be a problem with the PCAOB? And it'll tell you based on the 665 pages of information if yes, that would be an issue, or no, it wouldn't be. And then you can ask follow-ups. Okay, but they have this compensating control. Let's say, for example, they don't require an uppercase letter, but they require the password to be at least 15 characters long. Would that satisfy the PCAOB's requirements? And it'll say yes and give a short explanation as to why, or no as a short explanation as to why.
I love that, because what's the alternative? In the past, you would have had to do keyword searches in this document. How would you answer that question?
Typically by going to a senior or a manager.
Somebody who just knows it.
Someone who just knows it, which there's a lot to learn. It can take a long time to know this thing inside and out. So in that case, I think it saves a lot of time. It saves communication time. It saves the length in communication. Once I ask my senior question, the answers 2 hours later. There's that time. There's also just the time it takes to ask the question and time it takes for them to respond.
So can we see this?
I called it the document querying app.
We can work on that name.
Exactly. We perform testing to make sure that management is adequately reviewing their own users' access to make sure no one has inappropriate access to make changes they shouldn't be making. So a sample question would be, I have a user access review that is not signed off on by management. Would this consider an issue by the PCAOB? PCAOB is the governing body of the SOX audits.
I have a user access review that is not signed off on by management. Would this be considered an issue? And the answer is
yes.
A user access review that is not signed off on by management would be considered an issue by the PCAOB.
And I can ask a follow-up question, such as, what if there is a compensating control? A compensating control would be something along the lines of, oh, they didn't sign off on the user access review, but within the review, they have a list of comments suggesting that they still performed the review.
So in this case, we got the answer. If there is a compensating control in place for the user access review that is not signed off on by management, it may help mitigate the issue, but it is still important for management to provide the necessary sign-off as required by the PCAOB.
So in that case, instead of necessarily being an issue, it might be something along the lines of a process improvement. Again, it would take a couple more iterations to get exactly into it, and I'm not totally sure on a great example of a compensating control for something like that. But yeah, it's pretty quick. It's pretty good. So if I go and ask a question like, who is Tom Brady? Typically, ChatGPT would have a pretty good answer for that. Right?
He's been around for a while. Chances are ChatGPT has come across some blog posts and some news articles about Tom Brady.
It says Tom Brady's not mentioned in the provided context information.
Got it. And so that prevents hallucinations too, right? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with like making sure that the answer is factual?
I just finished making this yesterday. I haven't had a ton of time to double check it, but what I've tested it on is stuff I already know the answers to, and everything I've asked, it's been right.
So let me ask you this. ChatGPT has this concept of custom GPTs where you can create an AI agent inside of ChatGPT if you're on the Teams plan, and then you can upload documentation to it. So I could actually do that. I could take whatever 600-page document I need to analyze, and I could upload it, and then I could start querying it that way. How is what you're doing different than the custom GPTs? Or is it similar?
So it's definitely similar. I haven't tried uploading 600 pages of a PDF to the custom GPT to train it. I don't know if it actually could. So as a part of the process for it to learn the information I supply to it as part of the RAG program, it takes all 600 pages and then it breaks it down into bite-sized chunks. So roughly think about like 5,000 words or so. And then it'll break all 660 pages into 5,000 word chunks, and then it'll index it and squish it all together in a way that it's able to understand it. That makes the data size much more manageable, and it can better understand what's going on rather than the agents. When it tries to read everything at once, it's a little too high level and it won't really, the context will still be there, but it'll miss a lot of the specific details.
So this way you get higher quality answers because it's not searching the whole document every time you make a query.
Exactly. And that's why it can be almost instantaneous. And the agents one, I don't think would even work on this much data. I don't think. I haven't tried it.
I've run into issues with that in the past, so I totally imagine that like a 600-page document might be too much. So how did you build this?
YouTube, Stack Overflow. So I built out a program in an application called VS Code. It's just like a code editor. It's pretty solid. I used the GPT API to the process I described earlier of the chunking with the words and then the indexing. I used the API to do that. And then it also uses the API to then process that information to return output.
So I noticed it doesn't cite a page number or anything like that. Is that something that you could do? Because I would want to know where in the document can I go to find this information?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends on if the page numbers are in the text file or not. They might be, but I might be able to add them in even if they're not. That's a good question.
I'm thinking like if I'm a manager and you're giving me this answer, I would want to know where did you get it from? I wouldn't just trust the LLM.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, well, I'll try to add that in. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to know if it works. I imagine it could, because when I take a PDF and I just upload it to the ChatGPT chatbots, I can then ask it, where did you get this information? It'll come back with a page number.
The larger vision for this is to be able to take a piece of audit evidence, let's say password configurations. Is the password at least 8 characters long? Does it require uppercase, lowercase letters? Does it require special characters? And then test it. Say, hey, program, does this image fulfill these requirements, the requirements I just listed? And then it would say yes, yes, no, yes, and then send that analysis over to the RAG program and say, would this evidence be enough to pass the audit? And then you have the full loop of, does it pass our requirements and does it pass the PCAOB's requirements? And I have these right now in 2 separate programs. I haven't linked them together yet, but that's the next step.
So you can automate the testing of the evidence. You just have to get somebody to put the screenshot in to the program.
So you need to have the file ready to upload. All you need to know is the file path. on your computer.
So user uploads the file, and then your program will basically test that, or if it meets the standard or not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that is something that a human has been doing in a checkbox kind of situation. How much time do you think that could save?
Per engagement over a time frame.
Well, I guess the question is like, how much time on a single test, how much time does it save? And then I guess, could we estimate how much time it's going to save us across like an entire SOX audit?
So across an entire SOX audit, I'd say it should be able to save us about 99% of the time. For a given associate, I'd say it should be able to save close to 1,000 hours a year.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable. It's really good at some things and not as good at other things. Right now, it doesn't have an awesome ability to take information from one document and compare it to information from a different document. It needs to be within the same one,
Right.
But that's just a matter of OpenAI updating their models. And I think 2 years from now, I think it'll actually be at the 99%.
So where do you see this going?
So where I see it going is we have the audit procedures, the audit test steps that we need to ask the evidence. So for example, for the passwords, does this password configuration require 8 characters? We take that as a test step. We take the audit evidence as the document that we're analyzing. In the back end, I have a RAG program trained on every single password configuration that has passed, and another one trained on every single password configuration that has failed. We're then able to take the audit evidence, ask it that question, and then based off of all the thousands of previous password audits, it'll then be able to determine if this thing passes or fails. And I think that'll be the full loop.
Automating the SOX audit.
And I'm sure that process will then have to be audited itself. Someone's got to sign off on it. There's not much visibility into how these programs work, though. I don't know how something like this can be audited, because the part of the program that performs the analysis is 5 lines of code, 4 lines of code. It's not something that anyone has any visibility into. It's a black hole. You can't see. I guess the code in English is saying like, hello, ChatGPT, this is the information being passed in. This is the question we want to know. And then the output line is just like print answer. Like there's no visibility. So to audit these things is a big reason why it might be a while before we can actually see these implemented in an official accounting way.
Well, you know what I would suggest adding into your program is, for every answer, ask ChatGPT to provide its reason, its explanation for that answer. It's still a black box. You don't know how it got to that answer, but the explanation might be enough to accept the answer.
Oh, that's a good point. I initially wrote it to return as little information as possible because I didn't want any kind of like opinion in it, but I think that actually might be helpful.
So the reason I know this works is because we create CPE courses using AI. We have to create multiple choice questions, and the question has to have a question stem. It has to have 4 answers. 1 is correct and 3 are wrong. And it has to have feedback for each question answer, explaining why it is correct or why it is wrong. And that feedback is what allows us, when we review the question, to evaluate whether it's correct or incorrect in combination with listening to the episode. It really is helpful. Give it a try and you might be impressed. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely add that. Also just help me like test the thing out to see exactly how it's like, what it's actually
you
doing.
gotta think, like, how is it thinking, right?
Yeah.
This is really neat. Josh, thank you for taking the time to show us what you're working on. I'd love to follow up with you when you've gotten version 2 or whatever, whatever changes you've made. This is such a great example of AI in audit. And I agree with you. I think it will automate 99% of the testing someday.
Oh, it definitely will. It's just a matter of when. I mean, the technology's there. Like we can, like it's physically possible. We're just not allowed to use it.
But we will, when the partners see just how much time we can save, we'll figure out how to get around the compliance issue.
It's coming.
And especially like you can, if you had the resources, you could actually run a LLM like on a server.
Totally.
Hey, Josh, thank you for chatting with me.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.